Hey, greetings, this is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me today. It's a bit breezy out, so found a spot with some coverage from the wind. It's miserable this time of year with the way the winds blow. Chinook winds, whatever they want to call it. Warmer winds, but still a bitch to deal with. So what I wanted to share with you today, I actually just got done speaking to the people for like the 4th time, and this comes from Heather and Carl. And we here in Alaska, state parks and stuff have cabins, dried-in cabins that you can reserve ahead of time because there's usually a waiting list. I haven't looked into them recently, but I know that it could be several seasons before your reservation comes to fruition because of availability, because of other people reserving it. So they happen to reserve a cabin at Klutina Lake, and that is, it would be northeast of Valdez. So where this particular cabin is situated on this lake is by Mahlo River. So the river mouth comes out to the lake right at the cabin, basically within 100 yards or so, roughly, give or take. So this happened a couple years back. They get to the location via float plane from Lake Hood in Anchorage, and so they were planning on being there a week. One of their hobbies is photography. Target rich environment, beautiful. I mean, Chugach Mountains, just gorgeous. So the first couple days was getting acquainted with the area, getting less nervous about bears, and kind of expanding out away from the cabin, the security, because they were very timid. They were expecting it to be remote, but they were hearing sights and sounds that they weren't used to. And the one thing Heather prefaced was, from when they landed, they were hearing weird, inaudible noises from across the lake towards, I believe it's St. Anne Lake, towards that direction. So they didn't know what to think of it. It's the wilds of Alaska. They just figured it's whatever, you know, we'll deal with it. So that couple days goes by, and they're feeling a little more comfortable. And Carl had a shotgun for bear protection, and his first 2 rounds in that were bear bombs. It looks like a little bomb. It's a little rubber bullet, basically, scared the bears away. So he had that all good to go, and they're walking down the beach. And as they're going along the beach, she said it was kind of jagged and kind of hard at the first part of it, and then it kind of had a more of a gravelly beach, and then it got better. But they had to make it a ways away from the cabin for this to happen. Well, they're cut off by the mouth of the Mahlo River, so they had to cut back east along that side of the bank, and it's kind of marshy up and through there as well once they get past a certain point. So they got to where it got marshy and the gravel ended, basically, and that's where they stopped. And they were, I mean, there's plenty of environment for photography, so they were taking pictures. As they were doing so, they heard a long moaning kind of sorrowful howl, and it was really weird, really eerie, and it sounded like it was coming from within the tall grass at the marsh, and freaked them out. They immediately got an uneasy feeling and started back for the cabin. They got back to the cabin, uneventful. That noise eventually stopped because they heard it for most of the way back to the cabin, and they weren't sure if they just got out of range to hear it or if it stopped. So they get back in the cabin. They're kind of freaked out about it, discussing what could it be. Well, night comes along, and land of the midnight sun, it doesn't get freaking dark for very long when it does. But just as it was at its darkest point, they were sitting out in front of this little cabin, and they're on a couple lawn chairs by this fire pit, and they're just watching the scenery. They're just watching it. Well, Heather said directly across from them, which would be quasi kitty corner because of the direction they're facing more towards the little valley that goes up by St. Anne Lake. They were facing that direction, and they saw a bright light. Looked like someone across the lake had a super powerful flashlight beaming it at them. So they're like, hey, hey, they started waving, hey, we're over here, we can see your light, and just kind of laughing about it. And then they realized, well, that's an awfully bright light that's quite a distance for that bright of a flashlight. Well, this light dimmed down in size, and then they seen it moving very, very quick. It appeared slow, but they realized at that distance it had to be moving pretty fast to be tracking that quickly. So immediately they got weirded out again, said, let's get back into the cabin. So they get in the cabin and they're playing looky-loo out the window, and they decide, well, what do we do about this? Because this light, according to what they said, was going up and down the beach across from them. And they said it would only come so far, and then it was almost like doing a real oblong figure 8 kind of motion. And they were intrigued by it. They were watching, they were trying to get photos of it. They sent me a couple of them, but you couldn't really, all you could tell out was just a blurry light. So they ended up just chilling by the window until they got so tired they called it a night. It was wee hours of the morning. They slept until about 9 o'clock the next morning. They woke up to a thud and the place shuddering a little bit, almost like something big and heavy hit this little cabin and made it jiggle a little bit. Now immediately woke up, they're like, oh, earthquake. Is that an earthquake? Are we experiencing an earthquake? Carl jumps out, he's looking around, he doesn't see anything, and then Heather follows him out into the open area of the cabin. And as they're kind of looking around, making sure nothing fell or broke or anything, because the jiggle was pretty significant, they heard that mournful, bellowing, sorrowful kind of moan coming from like directly behind the cabin. Very, very creepy sounding. It sounded like, they said it sounded like something very large weeping, like crying, but too big to be a person. They said the tones were almost like Andre the Giant used to talk, but they couldn't make out exactly what was going on. It was just kind of like that weird kind of noise. So Carl grabs a shotgun and goes out to investigate. Carl by trade is an office guy. He's not an outdoors guy, but he's not new to firearms. He's done training and all that kind of stuff. He's just new to the deep woods. So he goes out ready, and he goes around to the back. And as he's making his way towards the back, he hears it continue. The bellowing, mournful, kind of sorrowful kind of tone continues. So he yells out, hey, do you need help? Meanwhile, he's got the shotgun. He's going up the little bit of a rise, going towards where it sounds like this sound is originating. He gets up to the top and he's like, hey, we're here, we can help. You know, we got a satellite phone, we can call for help. Not a peep. Everything goes dead quiet. Now, they're just a few days into this week-long trip, and some real high strangeness is going on. You know, this sound, along with the lights the night before, they were really getting on edge. So he yells out again, hey, we're over here, if you need help, come to the cabin. Just, you know, knock on the cabin, we'll help. So he backs off. When it went dead silent, he said he got a real creepy feeling, and he felt like his blood was running cold, like he just wasn't supposed to be there. No mind speak or anything like that, just he felt within himself, I shouldn't be here. So he turns around and gets back into the cabin, lays it out for Heather what he was feeling and what was going on. Now, as he was discussing it with her, boom, 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 3 hard knocks on the cabin. He literally had just gotten out of his mouth, I told him if they need help to knock on the cabin. And no sooner than he said that, boom, boom, boom. So immediately their eyes are huge. They get very quiet. They get to the center of the cabin. He grabs a shotgun before doing so, and they kneel down and get real low to the ground. And he yells out, come around by the door, come around by the door. Freaking out. You got to understand, they were still freaked out. And this is a couple of years back. So, talking to him on the phone. So they're sitting there quiet. It's full on daylight. Sun's out, full on daylight, but no sound outside, no birds or anything. It was just dead quiet. So a few moments go on, there's not a peep. So Carl decides, Heather, you stay here, I'm gonna go and look. So he goes out, he goes around the side, and he's looking about the area where they thought the 3 bangs came from. As he's doing so, he's going up a little bit of a rise to take a look back around the backside. As he's doing so, he notices this about volleyball sized ball of like bluish green kind of light shoot away from the cabin, just really fast. He said it was so fast it was almost, he almost didn't see it, is how quickly, and that spooked him right out. He right back inside, laid it out for Heather again, said, hey, here's what's going on, here's what's going on. So now they're discussing amongst each other, we should probably call somebody. We have the sat phone, why don't we call for an early pickup? Because they were feeling that uneasy. And Carl was like, well, we spent a lot of money and time and effort to get here. Let's just keep our wits about us, and we'll stay close to the cabin. We'll do our photography, and we'll make the best of it. This is just some weirdness, that basically, you know, dismissing it away. That evening comes on, and they didn't want to be outside. They didn't want to repeat it the night before, and so they're basically they're not in the moment anymore. They're more worried about when's that sound going to happen again, when, you know, when's the high strangeness going to kick off again. So they were really just, it really sucked. You know, I can imagine, you know, you come all this way and then to have some crazy stuff happen. So anyway, as they're discussing not wanting to be outside, they finally work up the courage. We'll build a big fire. It's still plenty light out. We'll stay close to the cabin. We'll have the shotgun. Let's enjoy the Alaskan outdoors. So they go out there. Carl's got the fire going. Heather's sitting next to him. They're sitting a little closer together this time. And then Carl says, both of us shouldn't have our backs to the woods. I'm gonna swing around a little bit. I'll keep you safe and look out that way, and I have the lake to my back. So Heather's okay with it. He has the shotgun leaned up on his foot so he could just lift his leg and grab the barrel if anything happens. So as he's sitting there talking to Heather, Heather's eyes get big as saucers, and that light is back across the way, same place it was in, you know, the night before. Started doing the same thing, and she was like, what the heck is that? So he turns around and looks, sees the light, and goes, yeah, it's doing the same thing, you know, just confirming what she's seeing, because she was really weirded out. Well, as they're discussing, you know, wondering how long it continued doing that the night before, because they stopped looking and went, you know, called it a night. They were kind of curious. I wonder if it's a power line having, you know, out of our view, but a power line just like ground lightning or something, you know, ball lightning. So they're having this discussion, trying to dismiss it away or find an excuse for why this light is there. So he moves his chair to beside Heather, and Carl and Heather are looking across that lake, and as they're doing so, that light stops and it gets real small, and as they're watching it, it shoots across the lake, real fast, into the trees off to their left across the mouth of the Mahlo River. Now immediately they jump up and they're like, screw this, we're done out here. You know, Carl made sure that everything was good as far as the fire, and they retreated inside. As soon as they got in and that door shut, thump, 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 thump. Harder and harder, louder and louder as a pounding on the outside of the cabin on the back side. Just that cadence. 3 to 4 bumps, and then 3 to 4 bumps, 3 to 4 bumps, and just harder and harder till the place was just kind of shuddering from it. So finally, I mean, they were on the verge of a breakdown. So Carl jumps out, grabs his shotgun, opens the door, and fires one of those rubber bullets into the water. Boom! Lets the shotgun blast go. Immediately, the pounding and thumping stops. He hears something off behind, moving in the trees and stuff behind the cabin, so he steps down, comes around the corner of the cabin, and fires that second rubber bullet off into the trees up high, just to kind of make a presence, like, yeah, we're here, we're gonna fire, we're gonna, you know, do what we got to do to protect ourselves. So he gets back inside, They're both pale white from stress. They couldn't sleep. They finally fell asleep at the wee hours of the morning. And when they got up, they decided, okay, we don't want to sound like lunatics calling from the sat phone to get picked up early. So Heather volunteered to be the blame and say she was having stomach issues and cramping issues or whatever, and they felt they shouldn't be that remote. So they get their game plan, they make the call, and help's on the way to come get them. They relayed none of this to the provisioner of the flight and all that. They just kept it to themselves. Well, while they're waiting, they had already packed up. They were used to traveling light anyway. They didn't have a whole bunch of provisions. They just had those freeze-dried meals and, you know, that type of thing. So they didn't have a whole lot to pack. So they were ready and down on the beach. Good clear weather. They knew that the flight would take, you know, only so long from Anchorage, and the flight was en route. So they felt a little more comfortable that the posse's on its way to help, you know, kind of thing, even though the posse coming to help had no clue what the hell they were dealing with. So as they're talking, Carl, they had their stuff lined up on the beach. Heather's sitting on one of the chairs, and Carl's looking back up towards the cabin, and he's like, you wait here, I'm gonna go look and see if I could see any sign of tracks or anything for what the hell was pounding on the back wall. Heather was like, yeah, you really shouldn't. He goes, trust me, we're okay. I got the gun. You know, there's only slugs in here now. I don't, you know, if anything happens, we'll be okay. I got the gun. She's like, okay. She was reluctant about it, but Carl was really, really curious. So he walks up and goes back behind the cabin, and he's looking for any sign of track or anything. He doesn't see anything. While he's doing so, unbeknownst to him, now Heather is only maybe 40 yards away. If he turned around, he could see her directly, outside of some of the shrubs and stuff, you know. But he turns around because he didn't see anything and was coming back, and Heather's looking across the lake. Behind her, unbeknownst to her, this ball of light was moving back and forth. Ugh. Good God. Can you imagine seeing your loved one right down over there, and there's this weird light orb going back and forth? So he immediately yells at her, Heather, Heather. She turns around, she sees the light stops, this orb stops, and then shoots off into the trees, passing over the Mahlo River and off into the woods. Immediately he comes down, he's like, are you okay, are you okay? And she goes, yeah, that was, you know, that was weird. And she heard a buzzing noise that she attributed to a plane off in the distance. That's why her focus was away from the cabin. She thought she was hearing the reverberation off the woods and stuff of an, you know, a coming plane. And she relayed to Carl, I heard this buzz that just kept going and going, and I thought it was the plane. That's why I didn't think to look behind me, because you were behind me. So they get their wits together. Of course, she was freaked out. She had to be calmed down. And, you know, hour or so later, their plane arrives and everything. And of course, they're apologetic for early, you know, call in or whatever. And, you know, of course, the proprietor of the air taxi was totally understanding. Didn't hold no grudge or anything. But yeah, just I've seen orbs at a distance, like across a valley. Nothing up close, nothing directly related to any hairy man stuff. So that was a new one to hear about up here. I've heard about them downstates or whatever, but this is the first I'm hearing of it up here in Alaska. Not that it doesn't happen, just first I'm hearing of it. I want to thank Heather and Carl for reaching out, giving me a call. Excuse me, giving me a call. And we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.